Don't you know Bitcoin transaction is revocable? I want to use some time to discuss the Lightning Network of Bitcoin. Before we talk about it, I think it's necessary to talk about the revocable transaction. Since in the payment channel, it is important to update the balance of each side, and the previous transaction need to be revocable. Otherwise, if someone just broadcasts the previous one, then you're in trouble. You all know that all the transactions on the blockchain cannot be changed. And how can we make it revocable? Thanks to the Bitcoin script to make it happen. Let's take a look. To support revocable transaction in Bitcoin, there are two ops code added to Bitcoin script. The main purpose for these two ops is to support the Lightning Network. One is in BIP65, op check log time verify. This opcode is for Bitcoin script system that allows the transaction output to be made unspendable until some point of time in the future. So if you specify a certain point of time in the future and followed by this verify, the output is not spendable until that time achieved. The other ops code is defined in BIP 112. This is called check sequence verify. So instead of a specific absolute time, this opcode is verifying the deep of the blocks or how many of the blocks this transaction to the previous output being spent. It defines the age or how many blocks away. Given these two ops code combined with the multisig, which defines in BIP 67, there has to be multiple signature required to spend a output. Let me create a transaction which is revocable, for example. So this is the transaction. I split the transaction into two parts. This is the input. This is the output. So the input is a regular input which referencing to a transaction. So in Lightning Network, that's referencing to a found transaction, but it can be any transaction. For example, this transaction is made from Alice to Bob, and this transaction we want to make it revocable, so there we will have the Alice signature in order to span the funding transaction or whatever transaction it referencing to. So the output will have two parts. The regular part is Alice address, which is a regular pay to public key hash. Is paid to Alice public key. For example, the input has 10 Bitcoin and Alice wants to pay herself 8 Bitcoin. And another output, this is the tricky part, is it allows Bob's public key plus, as we just said, some block height or block age, like 100 blocks. Or Alice public key and Bob's revoke public key. And this, for example, has 2 BTC. So how it works is if I broadcast this transaction into the Bitcoin network, this 8 Bitcoin can be used right away, no problem. This Alice paid to herself. You can consider it as a change address, and this output cannot be spent by Bob until 100 blocks away. That's, for example, like 2 days away. It cannot be spent 2 days away. So it's actually holding the fund for 2 days. The transaction can be revoked if Alice has Bob's revoke address private key. So this is Alice has his own private key for his own address, and if Alice has Bob's private key, it's a special, or it's a new key pair, which is not a regular key holding the Bob is holding for his wallet. It's just create this key pair only for revoke usage. So once Bob hands this revoke private key to Alice, it means the Bob is agreed that the transaction can be revoked. So again, the revoke has to be agreed on both sides. Once the Bob hand over his revocable private key to Alice, and Alice using his own private key, Alice can spend this 2 Bitcoin. She can transfer the 2 Bitcoin to her own address. Just to prevent 100 blocks away, Bob is okay to spend the coins. So this is the fundamental about the payment channel. If Alice keep paying Bob, let's say right now Alice, for this transaction, Alice paid Bob for 2 Bitcoin, and Alice made another transaction for another 1 Bitcoin. So what it does, all you need to do is to revoke this transaction and make a new transaction. Say, from the funding transaction of 10 Bitcoin, Alice eventually will return 7 and Bob will have 3. Just to create a new transaction, and at the same time, the Bob and Alice will exchange their revoke key to make sure that you cannot use the output because I have your revoke private key. By keep doing that, we just keep updating how you split this fund, and the latest transaction can be used to actually close the payment channel. We will talk about in detail in next video. Now we know the revocable transaction. We will talk about the payment channel and Lightning Network in the next video. Thanks for watching. Comments below what you want to see in my channel. See you next time. Bye.